Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the Golden Opportunities Coaching YouTube channel. Welcome to those of you who are new. Welcome back to those of you seasoned veterans. What we do around here, is bring about conversations of a psychological, mental health, emotional health paradigm. We do that as often as we can, usually several times per week. This is bad habits that may be holding you back in daily life. We kind of look at things from a more, I guess you'd say, macro mindset. So, if you're looking to break some of these mental bad habits, would love to be of value to you in that way. The first way to reach out to find out if you can get some assistance is reaching out through Twitter at PO Perception. Second way is the About Me section of this YouTube page. Either one will give you kind of an overview that way. And we can see if working together would be a good idea. In any event, the first thing to look at is dwelling. Look, we cannot change the past. The past is kind of something that's kind of fixed at this point. We don't have a time machine. We wish we did, but we don't. And so dwelling on it or overthinking about it can be, and often is, extremely detrimental in the way in which we relate with the rest of the world. And understanding how to avoid dwelling on the past is one of the things that we almost all have to learn how to do in a way that makes sense for us. And knowing how to do that, though, can be super challenging in a number of ways. The challenge becomes avoiding overthinking. Rumination is the act of overthinking on a continual basis. When we ruminate, we get to a place where life becomes overwhelming in such a way that it doesn't serve our greater good. And then the negativity that takes over from that rumination ultimately makes us a very bitter and angry person or an overwhelmed person, to the point where we take our overwhelm out on other people in such a manner that it makes being around individuals harder. Thus, the social isolation that comes with the idea of, kind of trying to fix our lives can become very overwhelming without us even meaning for it to be. This overwhelm usually comes down to the simple fact that when we feel like we don't have a choice, we often just kind of wall ourselves off from the rest of the world, because our belief that there is no choice to change things for the better ultimately overwhelms us to the point where we can't make intelligent or meaningful or masterful decisions for our own benefit, which ultimately then leads to a whole world of struggle, which isn't good for us or in any way. So, kind of looking at that from a wider standpoint, and also then the other thing is when we get into isolation, it means that it's more likely that other people won't know our emotional state, thereby creating an emotional state that's very topsy-turvy, and people can't necessarily predict what we're going to do or how we're going to feel, and thus they avoid us by default. If a person has underlying mental health conditions, the isolation caused by not emoting can actually make the condition worse, because a person becomes more increasingly paranoid toward the idea that the world is against them when that isn't the case. Sometimes isolation can also lead a person to believe that there's no way out, and the claustrophobia associated with that belief is often and almost always an overwhelmed situation that can be corrected or can at least be temporarily rectified. The challenge is if a person is isolated for long enough, they start to believe that they cannot rectify the situation, thereby creating a whole bunch of challenges as it relates to kind of, isolating themselves from things that are not necessarily in their best interest, and ultimately getting to a meaningful and, or I guess you'd say, better way about things. And so when we begin to understand the value of how to do what we're trying to do, we certainly then have a lot more, I guess you'd say, struggle around the idea of what to do next. And indecision can cause persons to become even more isolated because they don't feel they have the control mechanism in place to make better decisions for their own life, and thus the challenge becomes how to manage life if a person believes that they don't have appropriate levels of control of their own life. And so that struggle is seemingly almost feeling like it's never ending, even though that isn't factually accurate. So it's important to find ways to articulate those needs in a way that makes sense for everyone involved, and that it becomes a beginning to solutions. So hopefully this is helpful. I encourage you keep your feet on the ground, keep your mind in the moment. Until next time, everybody.